sometimes we're not building the right things. We could build something really wonderful and nobody cared. It isn't enough to build it right. You've got to build the right product. You've got to build something that solves a real problem for customers that they care about. Everybody is sort of responsible for changing how they approach what they're doing. And at the same time, I haven't seen an organization successfully do that without a leader who is inspiring the organization to make that kind of change. If you think about it, the people who build products, the people who are doing this stuff, they're trying to make the world better, right? They're corner of the universe. And if you help them understand that there is a way to make things more meaningful than what they've been doing, they can get on board. And instead of resisting the change, they start insisting on the change.
Hi Scott, I'm glad to see you here, that you're joining us to talk a bit about product tendencies here in Ukraine and in general in the world. So I would like to talk a bit about you, because I know that you're quite passionate about helping companies to understand that they are building the right product and build it right. So what is your opinion about how to build the right product? What is the right product? And what is the building the product right?
Okay, well, thank you very much, first of all. And of your 7 questions, I'll pick one of the ones from the middle and see how we go. So, thrilled to be here. Really great engagement with the folks who are here today.
Yeah.
And when I think about building the right product right, what I'm sort of saying is I learned as an engineer that the first thing I wanted to do, almost be like a craftsman and get good at building things. But then I realized sometimes we're not building the right things. We could build something really wonderful and nobody cared. Nobody used it. It didn't solve a problem. It didn't provide value. Or I've had a client who tells a story about how he built an engineering team that got really, really good at their software development. They got really good quality, automated delivery, automated builds, just really good engineering craftsmanship. And they built these products and the company went out of business because nobody bought them. Right? So it isn't enough to build it right. You've got to build the right product. You've got to build something that solves a real problem for customers that they care about. And it's got to be something that drives value for the business, right? That it's a good investment to make. There are problems to be solved and there are products and services to create everywhere. I think it's probably a longer conversation to say what the signs are. Mm-hmm. But what I can sort of look back and say, well, what are the triggers? What are things that somebody sees? I don't know if they're the perfect signs, but if somebody says, this was my forecast that I was trying to hit, and I'm not hitting it. My revenue's going down, or my growth stopped and I've flattened out, or I'm trying to enter a new market with a product that I already understand and it's just failing. Why is it failing? Why can't I sell my stuff in Western Europe? Those sorts of, when what I think should be working doesn't work, is a trigger to ask why it's not working, right? And so I don't know that that's necessarily a sign. I mean, that's a sign, but there could be other signs. I had a client once where the chief marketing officer brought me in and she said, here's the problem. There's a bunch of things we need to change. There's a bunch of things we're doing wrong, but I don't have a burning platform. We're growing at 12% a year. And so people are happy. The forecast is for 12% a year, but I'm telling you, Scott, we should be growing at 40% a year because we're not doing it right. Right? So sometimes it's kind of hard to tease it out. And so then in that situation, we did the things to help improve, but we had to be careful because things weren't on fire. It was harder to get people to change. They're like, well, I don't see why I need to change. This is perfectly fine. We're growing 12% a year every year, right? That's great. We'll double every 6 years.
Okay, let's assume that you feel that something is going wrong. There is some signs or triggers that the company either in their bad direction. So what are the steps that the company or the management of the company should take in order to start getting out of that problem?
Okay, so that's a great question. And what I really like about it is that the answer of how you get out of the problem is the same as how you stay out of the problem. Right, so you would use the same approach and the same steps, whether you're in the problem or not. And the first thing you want to do is, essentially, you're building a system for creating products. Right, you make decisions about where to make your investments, you make decisions about how to make your investments, and then you execute to make those investments. Right, you're building software to build the capabilities to solve the problems you choose in order to pursue some market opportunity, right? So you've sort of got this system that you put in place. And that system needs three things. The first thing it needs is to create opportunities for feedback. So you need opportunities while you're doing this stuff to see if you're heading in the right direction. It would be like putting a blindfold on and running a marathon. There's no way you're going to cross the finish line. So you need to be able to at least peek every so often and realize you're about to run off the side of the road and get back on track. So the first thing you got to do is create those opportunities for feedback. And then the second thing you have to do is use those opportunities to get feedback. It isn't enough to create those opportunities, and I've seen organizations that will put a system in place that's got all of these strategically designed opportunities for feedback and then not put in the effort to get the feedback. So you got to get the feedback. And that feedback helps you course correct in there's two classes of ways that you can sort of get off target. One of them is if you get misaligned with your market, you're not solving the problems you need to solve, you're not focusing on the customers you need to focus on. So you can use these opportunities for feedback to find out that you're misaligned, get feedback from your market. The other thing that can happen is you could be trying to solve a problem that your organization isn't capable of trying to solve. Maybe you can't do it at all. Maybe you can't do it in the timetable you need to be able to do it. You might have a window of opportunity that's closing. Maybe you can't cost effectively do it, or you don't have people who can do it to the right level of fit and finish and quality.
It's quite a common problem.
And it is fairly common. So you need opportunities to know that your organization is not delivering relative to your plan. So create opportunities for feedback and then get feedback, right? Measure whether or not things are working outside and measure whether or not things are working inside. And then the third thing you have to do is you have to change what you're doing based on what you learn.
Okay, and who is responsible for this? Usually,
so
from the product team.
It's both one person and everyone. So the reason it's everyone is this whole system has a series of different decisions that have to be made in sort of different contexts, different levels of concern. Do we kill the project entirely? Do we add new features to the product? Do we split the product and sell different products in different markets? But there's sort of different levels of thinking and decisions that are responses to what you learn. And so you need different people who are who are able to get feedback, who get the feedback, and who are willing to change their decisions, and then manage the sort of the ripple effects of the changes of those decisions all up and down throughout the system. So everybody is sort of responsible for changing how they approach what they're doing. And at the same time, I haven't seen an organization successfully do that without a leader who is inspiring the organization to make that kind of change. Because there are people who resist, as you asked earlier.
Because people in general, they are against any changes. They used to work in some conditions, and then when something starts changing, they're quite resistant to the change.
Yeah, they absolutely can be. But the other thing I would say is that people are resistant to change until they're not resistant.
Yeah.
Right. So if you think about it, the people who build products, the people who are doing this stuff, they're trying to make the world better. Right. Their corner of the universe. It's not just I'm punching a clock and getting a check. It's I'm trying to do something meaningful. And if you help them understand that there is a way to make things more meaningful than what they've been doing, they can get on board. And instead of resisting the change, they start insisting on the change.
I also heard about such term as the build trap. Some companies, after defining their product and defining their product market fit, start working on the features, and they're adding more features because they need to show the results to their ventures capitals, to their board. So, and then this just a circle when they're trying to deliver more features, but they are not needed, and they're the users and the customers don't use it.
Yeah.
So how to get out, how to escape this, or how to to understand that you're you get in that trap, and now you need to think how you can get out of this in order not to affect your your board or your position, that you might not receive another funding from their venture capitalists. So how to solve this?
Yeah. Okay. So there's a really great book called "Escaping the Build Trap" by Melissa Perry.
I started reading it, so that's why I'm asking it.
Right. So I won't give you as good an answer as Melissa did because she used a whole book to do it. But there's a couple things that are sort of important, and I'll talk on two aspects. One of them, help me remember, is about jumping to conclusions, and the other one is around measuring what's easy to measure. So when you talk about getting features done and reporting on how many features I finished or how many stories are finished or how much work I did, that's sort of like saying, give me a reward for working really hard, whether or not it was the right work to do. Yeah. Right? It's measuring things that are easy to measure. It's easy to count the output. What's hard to measure is whether or not what you built made a difference. That's what's important to measure. And a lot of organizations, maybe because they're feeling other external pressures, take the easy way out sometimes. Yeah. Or maybe they just haven't learned that they shouldn't be measuring those things, and they just measure them because they thought they were supposed to. And they just haven't learned, right? A lot of people just haven't learned yet, right? So part of the problem, escaping that problem, is shifting from measuring what's easy to measure, how much work did I do today, to measuring what's important to measure. Did it really solve a problem? Did it drive new revenue? Did it make customers better? So getting into that measurement piece, there's a sort of a couple different dimensions. We talk about things we can measure right now and things we can measure eventually, sort of leading indicators and lagging indicators. And the reason you break those things up, and the reason it makes a difference that way, is everything we're building, we're in control of what we choose to build and how we build it. We're not in control of how our customers use it and whether or not it works. We're just hopeful about that. Yeah. And so our plan, our model is built on a set of assumptions, which we could turn into hypotheses and measure. Yeah. There's a woman, Teresa Torres, who talks about continuous discovery, which is around building into your process the regular measurement and getting feedback, right? So that's like her focus, and she's really great at that stuff too. But if I think about what I'm trying to do, I'm building something because I believe it's going to solve a problem. And I believe that if I solve that problem, the question to ask next is, so what? If I solve that problem, who cares? What's different? Yeah. So I'm only going to solve problems that lead to some kind of a change. And that change, I can think of it as somebody has a change in behavior. I make some process better, I make a journey better, I make it faster, I make it go away, I make it cost less, whatever it is. Right? I'm solving some problem to change this behavior. And that change in behavior, I believe, is going to lead to some financial benefit for the organization. I'm solving a problem for my customer that is aligned with my business model. And so I can measure whether or not their behavior changes kind of right away. Right? I give them a new tool, they start using it. If it still takes them just as long, I didn't do it right. If they do it faster, I did it right. If they make better quality, whatever, right? So I get this immediate feedback for my first assumption, and then lagging later, I can find out if it made a difference to my business case.
Nice, thank you. Thank you for clarifying this, because it's quite an important question for me. So basically, I want to switch to our Ukrainian product market. Okay. I know that a while ago you tried to share your opinion regarding what is their Ukrainian market at that point, how the service IT outsource companies versus product companies, and do you see this shift and their mind transformation since that time till now? So what do you see any change in on Ukrainian market, or maybe?
I don't know if it's a Ukrainian change or just more of a general one. General. But I'm seeing more and more engagement from companies in the U.S. that I'm working with companies here and elsewhere, with contractors, and more of the analysis and requirements side of things, right? So getting closer to product management to get from build me this thing I need you to build, which is my jumping to conclusions, the other half of our escaping the build trap problem. So you tried to trick me so I wouldn't answer the rest of it, right? So getting away from build this set of things I asked for to help me know what I need to build, right? So we're starting to see, as companies appreciate that they need to do more of that work than they're staffed up to do, they're looking for help doing it. And I'm starting to see that some of those companies are reaching out to folks like the firms here in Lviv to do some of that work.
Yeah. My next question is, since we are here on the Ukrainian market, we have the prevalence of the IT outsource companies, and of course, their major part of specialists, they have this project thinking, not the product thinking.
Right.
So how to transform thinking of such professionals to the product professionals? Because if I want to build a product company here inside Ukraine, I need to have the professionals in my team who will be able to work in such conditions, basically.
Right. So this actually comes back to the build trap again. Right. So not only in a project-oriented world is that sort of the definition of the build trap, but you have a business model that's built to reinforce the trap, where an outsourcing company, if they establish a relationship with a customer who says, here is a bunch of work I need somebody to do, bid on that work for me. That's the price. When you're done, I pay you. Right? You're locked in. If you have a relationship that says, I have a bunch of work that needs to be done, and you are able to say, we will put our best people on it, and they will do the best they can do. And here's how much it costs to put all of their attention for 6 months, which is what we think it might take. If it takes 7 months, it takes 7. If it takes 4, it takes 4. You're not paying for the thing. You're paying for our focus. So you have to first change the way that budgeting works, right? The nature of that relationship, which requires you to have trust, right? There's a bunch of reasons that that's not already there. It's hard to do. But then within that environment, you can reach an agreement that says, we will always work on the most important thing to work on, which might be, but usually isn't exactly, the conclusion you jump to, right? That original project list. I talked about these sort of opportunities for feedback. What those opportunities do is, over the course of a project, you get smarter. You learn things. You learn about your capacity. You learn about your customers' interests. You learn about whether or not your designs are working. Yeah. Right? And so when you learn those things, you're getting smarter. But if you don't change what you're doing, what's the point of getting smarter? So you need an engagement, a financial relationship that says, we're going to include getting smarter as part of doing the work. And we're going to include doing something about it when we get smarter. As soon as I learned that that's a really bad road to drive down because it's got potholes, we agree we're going to stop driving down that road. We're going to drive down this other road. Okay, right? But that's not the way that contracts are set up, where we have, here's the list of things that at the start of the project we think might be right. And then over the course of building it, we discover they're not right, and there's nothing we can do about it. We just got to keep building them anyway, right? That's building the wrong thing. Yeah. Right, and so changing the way that relationship is set up is the only way you can change how that relationship plays out.
Okay, and how would I keep the team motivated and here inside the company in order to work on the product?
Right.
What is motivation for them?
Yeah. Okay. So it's for me that might even be the easiest part.
Yeah.
There's an intrinsic motivation that I'm doing something that matters. When you have this sort of project-oriented world, you start out with, here's our mission, and here's this list of stuff we got to go do because it's worth doing, because there's some good reason to do it. Okay. And people are like, okay, I've got work that I'm doing that matters, I hope. And then the more they do, and the more they learn, the more they discover that it doesn't matter, or it's the wrong way to do it, or people are making trade-offs that compress them and sort of undermine the value they could be creating. So that's actually demotivating. Yeah. If I flip it into the world that says, we are bringing you on board to do this valuable thing, to make this difference, and we think it's this way, we think this is the way to do it, but we want to course correct while we're doing it, right? We've set a course. It's like if you've ever sailed and you set a sailboat course to an island, okay, you don't just point the boat right at the island and go. What happens is the boat drifts a little bit because of the way the wind works as it hits the sail. And so you have to make these course corrections or else you're not going to get to your goal. And so in software or hardware, any product development, you need to be open to changing to adapt to what you learn. And so when you set up a relationship that's baked into the structure of your financial relationship, that's what gives you the opportunity to do that. And seeing that you are course correcting, when you get smarter, when you get new intelligence, you adapt to it. What you're seeing every day, hands on keyboard, is I just became more likely to realize that goal. I just became more likely to make a difference, right? And so that motivation is a feedback there.
So also, like what I noticed in Ukraine regarding the product companies, the people like taking into account that there are more responsibilities, like more like work involved in their like developing a product, they just don't start working on this because they're afraid to fail. How to work, like how to overcome the issue with like fear of failure.
Right. I don't know enough about psychology and culture to really know the best ways to change those aspects, but a couple things that I will share. There's a phrase that used to go around a lot about failing fast, and I think that's kind of ridiculous. I don't want to fail fast. I want to learn fast. Now, it turns out one of the best ways to learn is through failure. So that's really what was intended by this sort of fail fast thing. Try things, break things, but the rest of the sentence that people forget to repeat is try things and learn from them, break things and learn from it, fail and learn from it. Right?
I heard a lot about this practice from our trip to Israel. Their mindset is about like we are not afraid to fail because if we fail, we'll have a lot of like experience which we can then apply to a new project and if like skip those problems that I made or like some steps that I should just avoid in order to make the new business like later. And it was like so exciting for me to see that they are not afraid to fail. They just see it as an opportunity that like, they have more experience to start a new project. So I'm thinking, why do we like fear to start something? Because we just fear and not start, and then nothing changes. So just curious how such culture like is in Israel, like can be here in Ukraine or even in the other countries, because it's not about only Ukraine, it's just in general about the rest of the world, probably.
Right. Yeah, so as I said, I'm not enough of, I'm still a student of culture, if you will, but what I would start with is I would ask the question of why are they afraid? Right? Are they afraid of the ramifications or the repercussions of failure? Is somebody saying, figure it out and get it right the first time. If you get it right the second time, you failed. Or is somebody saying, get it right, please?
Yeah.
Right? So I don't know what it is about that sort of dynamic, but my intuition is to look first at what it is they're actually afraid of.
So why?
Yeah, right? Because I don't frame it as failing. Failing is getting knocked down and not getting back up.
Yeah.
If you get back up, you didn't fail. If you learned something from it, you didn't fail. Right? So as an individual, there are elements of reframing your thinking. But within an organization and within a culture within an organization, I don't know what those things are, but I would ask the question, or what is it that they're, like very specifically, what is it that they're afraid of, not abstractly? And then I would look to see how do I solve that problem.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts about this. And again, I would like to thank you for being here with me, answering all my questions. I'm really pleased to be here as well to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much. Yeah. My pleasure.